Growing up, I always believed weddings were magical. As a child, I'd sit in my room, cutting pictures out of magazines, white gowns with flowing trains, flowers spilling over tables, and fairy tale castles that seemed plucked from dreams. I told myself, one day that will be me. Now, at 32, I was finally planning my own wedding, and it was everything I had envisioned. Except for one thing, my sister Jessica. Jessica was my younger sister by 4 years, and while I had built my life on hard work and meticulous planning, she lived as if the world were a stage created for her entertainment. She was the golden child, the one who was showered with praise for every small accomplishment. While I buried myself in textbooks, Jessica pranced through life with her effortless charm and a trail of glittering drama. Jess has always had a flair for the dramatic, my mom would say with a chuckle, brushing off another of her impulsive antics. Impulsive was putting it mildly. Jessica was the kind of person who'd quit her job on a whim because the office coffee was too bitter, only to call me weeks later begging for money to pay rent. My parents, of course, enabled her every step of the way. "She's finding her path," they'd insist, while I held my tongue and let my resentment simmer. Liam, my fiancé, was the antidote to all the chaos. Where Jessica thrived on attention, Liam was steady and dependable. We met at a charity gala I'd planned 3 years ago, a classic meet cute, over a spilled glass of wine. He was charming without being overbearing, and he had this way of making me feel seen, really seen, in a way no one else ever had. He was my anchor, my best friend, and the person who reminded me that it was okay to let my guard down. When we got engaged, I was over the moon. I wanted to share my happiness with everyone, even Jessica. Despite our rocky relationship, I hoped this wedding might bring us closer. I invited her to be a bridesmaid, envisioning late-night giggles over dress fittings and a rare chance to bond. But from the very beginning, it was clear Jessica had no intention of playing her part. "Oh, Rachel," she sighed during our first fitting, her perfectly manicured hand waving dismissively. "This dress is just so plain. Don't you think you could spice it up a little? Add some sparkle or a slit?" She tugged at the fabric, frowning as if offended by its simplicity. "It's classic, Jess," I replied, forcing a smile. "I wanted something timeless." She rolled her eyes. "Timeless? More like boring." That was Jessica in a nutshell. No filter, no regard for anyone else's feelings, and certainly no willingness to compromise. Still, I bit my tongue. This was my wedding, and I refused to let her taint it. The tension escalated as the weeks went on. Jessica skipped key planning meetings, ignored texts from the other bridesmaids, and didn't bother RSVPing to the bridal shower until the night before. When she did show up, she spent the entire time scrolling through her phone, looking up only to make backhanded compliments like, "Oh, Rachel, this is nice. I mean, it's not what I'd do for my wedding, but good for you." Liam tried to comfort me. "She's probably just jealous," he said one night as I vented my frustrations. "You've got everything she doesn't. Stability, direction, someone who loves you. That's hard to swallow when you've spent your whole life trying to be the center of attention." Maybe he was right, but it didn't make it any easier. Every interaction with Jessica felt like a tightrope walk one wrong step, and she'd turn it into a melodrama that made her the victim and me the villain. My parents weren't much help either. "She's your sister," my mom reminded me constantly, as if that fact alone excused her behavior. "You just need to be patient with her." Patient. I'd been patient for years, tolerating her selfishness and cleaning up her messes. But this was my wedding, my one moment to shine, and I was determined not to let her ruin it. The centerpiece of my dream wedding was my dress. It was everything I had ever wanted. A mermaid silhouette with intricate lace, delicate pearl buttons down the back, and a train that swept across the floor like a cloud. The moment I saw it, I knew it was the one. It felt like armor, a symbol of the life I had built and the love I was about to step into. Jessica, of course, had something to say about it. "You're really going to wear that?" she asked during the second fitting, her tone dripping with judgment. "It's so extra. Not everyone needs a big production." I bit back the urge to snap. "It's my wedding, Jess. I want it to be special." She shrugged. "If you say so." Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs, the simmering resentment in her snide remarks. But I wanted to believe, foolishly, that she'd rise to the occasion. That, for once, she'd set aside her ego and be happy for me. I didn't realize just how wrong I was until it was too late. It happened 3 weeks before the wedding. I had been out running errands all morning, checking off a never-ending list of last-minute details. By the time I got home, all I could think about was taking off my shoes and sinking into the couch with a cup of tea. Instead, I walked into chaos. As I stepped into the living room, I heard Jessica's voice from the dining area, sharp and mocking. "I don't know why she's making such a big deal about this wedding. It's not like she's some princess." My parents' laughter followed, a mix of nervous and indulgent. I froze, my hand tightening on the strap of my bag. I wanted to march in and confront her, but exhaustion and years of being told to keep the peace held me back. I made my way upstairs to my bedroom, eager to escape the noise. But when I opened the door, my breath caught in my throat. My dress, my beautiful, perfect wedding dress, was ruined. Thick streaks of red paint slashed across the ivory fabric, dripping down like blood. The lace I had admired for weeks was now stiff and stained, and the delicate train looked like it had been dragged through a crime scene. For a moment, I couldn't process what I was seeing. My chest felt tight, and my hands shook as I dropped my bag to the floor. "No, no, no," I whispered, rushing to the dress and touching it with trembling fingers. The paint was still wet, smearing across my skin and sealing the reality I so desperately wanted to deny. Behind me, I heard the unmistakable sound of Jessica's heels on the hardwood floor. "Oh, you're back," she said, her tone casual, as if we were discussing the weather. I spun around, my voice breaking as I demanded, "What did you do?" Jessica leaned against the doorframe, her arms crossed, a smug smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "Relax, Rachel. It's just a dress. You can get another one." The rage that surged through me was almost blinding. "This was my wedding dress, Jessica. My dream dress. Why would you do this?" My voice cracked under the weight of my emotions, but Jessica didn't flinch. She tilted her head, feigning innocence. "Honestly," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, "yours was just too much. I mean, come on, Rach. A train that long? All that lace? It was over the top. People would have thought you were trying to upstage a royal wedding or something." My heart pounded in my chest. "You destroyed my dress because you thought it was too much? Are you insane?" Jessica shrugged, unfazed by my outburst. "I'm just saying it wouldn't hurt to be a little more modest. Like my dress. Simple, elegant, not screaming for attention." The realization hit me like a slap in the face. This wasn't just about my dress, it was about her. Jessica, who always needed to be the center of attention, couldn't handle the idea of my wedding outshining hers. Her dress was plain because she had insisted on it being minimalist, and now, seeing my gown had driven her into a jealous frenzy. Before I could respond, our mom appeared behind her. "What's going on here?" she asked, her eyes darting between the ruined dress and my tear-streaked face. "She ruined my wedding dress!" I shouted, pointing at Jessica, who simply rolled her eyes. "Oh, Rachel, I'm sure she didn't mean to," Mom began, but I cut her off. "Didn't mean to? Look at it!" I motioned to the dress, anger and disbelief flooding my voice. "She poured paint on it, Mom," Jessica piped up, her voice syrupy sweet. "It was an accident, okay? I was just trying to help." My mother sighed, her tone placating. "Rachel, it's just a dress. We'll figure something out." "Are you kidding me?" I snapped. "She ruined my dress, and you're just letting her get away with it? I can't believe this." Tears stung my eyes as the betrayal from both of them sank deeper into my chest. Jessica smirked as if she had already won, and my mom's dismissal was the final nail in the coffin. That was the moment I realized something had to change. I wasn't going to let Jessica or anyone else trample over me anymore. The days following the destruction of my dress were a haze of anger, disappointment, and simmering determination. I couldn't shake the image of Jessica's smug face, her casual dismissal of what she had done, and my mother's infuriating attempt to brush it all under the rug. I wanted to scream, cry, and rage, but I knew better than to give Jessica the satisfaction of seeing me unravel. Liam was my rock through it all. When I told him what happened, he was furious. "Rachel, she crossed a line. She doesn't get to ruin your day because of her insecurities." He held me tightly, his calm presence grounding me. "We'll fix this, okay? You'll have a dress, and we'll have our wedding. But promise me something. Don't let her get away with this." His words planted a seed in my mind, a need to reclaim the power Jessica had taken from me. I wasn't going to let her trample over me anymore. I would get my revenge, but it wouldn't be impulsive or messy like her antics. No, it would be calculated, precise, and undeniable. The first step was salvaging my wedding plans. I reached out to my bridal boutique in a panic, explaining what had happened. They were sympathetic but firm. There was no way to repair my original dress in time. Instead, they offered to rush a different gown from their collection. It wasn't the one I had dreamed of, but it was stunning, and I made peace with it. Jessica might have stolen my first choice, but she wouldn't ruin the whole day. But revenge, sweet and satisfying, wasn't far from my mind. Jessica's wedding was scheduled for 2 months after mine, and I had already agreed to pay for part of her catering as a gesture of goodwill, a decision I now deeply regretted. As I stared at the invoice on my desk, an idea began to form. Why should I continue to support her when she had done everything to sabotage me? She wanted to play games? Fine. I'd play them too, but I'd make sure the rules favored me. The next time I saw Jessica, she acted as if nothing had happened. She breezed into the family dinner, her laughter ringing through the room, and plopped down at the table like a queen holding court. "Rachel, you're so quiet," she said with a syrupy smile. "Still upset about the dress? I told you it was an accident." I clenched my jaw but kept my voice even. "Of course not, Jessica. I'm just focused on the wedding. So much to do, you know." Her smirk faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered. "Well, I'm sure it'll be lovely, even if it's not exactly what you planned." Liam's hand brushed mine under the table, a silent reminder to stay calm. I smiled back at her, my mind already racing with plans for what I'd do next. The first step of my revenge required some careful groundwork. I quietly reached out to the catering company handling Jessica's wedding and confirmed my suspicions. The deposit I had paid could be refunded if canceled with enough notice. Perfect. I didn't make any rash moves yet, but knowing I had that option was empowering. Next, I gathered proof of what Jessica had done to my dress. I had taken pictures of the ruined gown as soon as I found it, and I backed them up in multiple places. I also made a note to keep receipts for all the additional expenses her actions had forced me to incur. If Jessica thought she could walk away from this unscathed, she was in for a rude awakening. As my wedding day approached, I poured myself into the final preparations. Liam and I decided to scale back the guest list to include only those who truly supported us. Jessica was, unfortunately, still on the list. Removing her would have caused a family scandal I didn't want to deal with, but I made sure she would have no special role in the ceremony. The day of the wedding arrived, and despite everything, it was magical. The new dress fit me perfectly, and Liam's vows brought tears to my eyes. We were surrounded by love, laughter, and people who genuinely cared for us. Jessica, predictably, spent most of the reception pouting in the corner, clearly annoyed that she wasn't the center of attention. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But my satisfaction only grew as her wedding day loomed closer. In the weeks leading up to it, Jessica's entitlement reached new heights. She called me constantly, demanding advice on everything from floral arrangements to seating charts. Each call was punctuated with passive-aggressive jabs about how simple her wedding was compared to mine. I bit my tongue and played along, all while finalizing the details of my plan. A week before her wedding, I made the call to the catering company. The deposit was refunded, and I sent a polite email to Jessica letting her know I was no longer covering the cost. Her reaction was immediate and explosive. "Rachel!" she screeched over the phone. "You can't just cancel the catering. What am I supposed to do now?" "I'm sorry, Jessica," I replied, my tone as sweet as honey. "I just didn't think it was fair for me to pay after everything that happened. Surely you understand." "You're doing this because of the stupid dress, aren't you?" she snapped. I let a small, satisfied smile creep across my face. "I'm not sure what you mean, Jess, but I hope your wedding is everything you dreamed of." Her furious sputtering was music to my ears. On the day of her wedding, I heard from several mutual friends that the lack of catering caused absolute chaos. Guests were confused and annoyed, and Jessica's meltdown was apparently a sight to behold. But I wasn't there to see it. I had a spa day planned with Liam, a much more enjoyable way to spend my time. When I sent Jessica the bill for the damages to my dress the following week, complete with photo evidence and receipts, she didn't dare argue. She paid it in full, likely under pressure from our parents, who were finally forced to acknowledge her behavior. For the first time in years, I felt like I had taken control. Jessica had underestimated me, and she'd learned the hard way that I wasn't someone to be pushed around anymore. The day of Jessica's wedding dawned bright and sunny, a stark contrast to the storm brewing beneath the surface. I knew she must be scrambling, though she'd never admit it to me. Since I'd canceled the catering, I hadn't heard a word from her, just secondhand reports from family members that she was beside herself, trying to find a replacement. I spent the morning sipping coffee with Liam, enjoying the serenity of a day I wasn't obligated to ruin my own peace for. But I couldn't help the small flicker of anticipation that danced in my chest. Today was the day Jessica would face the consequences of her actions, and I had ensured it would be a moment she'd never forget. By mid-afternoon, I was dressed and ready to make my appearance at her wedding. Liam had suggested we skip it altogether, but I knew better. Staying home would give Jessica room to twist the narrative, painting me as bitter or unsupportive. No, I needed to be there, not just as a witness, but as the calm, collected sister who had simply held up a mirror to her misdeeds. When we arrived at the venue, the tension was palpable. Guests milled around the entrance, their conversations low and hurried. It didn't take long to figure out why. The smell of hastily prepared takeout wafted through the air-greasy pizza and foil pans of pasta clearly sourced from a local chain. The elegant catering Jessica had boasted about for months was nowhere to be seen. "Rachel," Liam whispered as we approached the crowd, his voice tinged with amusement. "You really went for it, didn't you?" I gave him a sly smile. She earned it. Inside the hall, the chaos was even more evident. Staff rushed around with mismatched serving trays, trying to salvage the situation, while Jessica's fiancé, Greg, wore an expression that could only be described as pure misery. And Jessica? She was standing near the head table, her face a mask of barely concealed rage. When she spotted me, her eyes narrowed into slits. "Oh, look who decided to show up!" she hissed as I approached. "Here to gloat, Rachel?" "Gloat?" I asked, feigning innocence. "Jessica, I wouldn't dream of it. I'm here to celebrate your special day." Her lips twisted into a snarl. "Don't act like you don't know what you did. You're the reason my wedding is a disaster." I folded my hands in front of me, keeping my tone calm and measured. "Jessica, I'm not sure what you're talking about, but if you're referring to the catering, I gave you plenty of notice. It's not my fault you didn't plan accordingly." "Plenty of notice?" she barked, her voice rising. Heads turned as nearby guests began to notice the commotion. "You canceled less than a week before my wedding. Who does that?" The temptation to fire back was strong, but I held my ground. Instead, I leaned in slightly and said, just loud enough for the people nearby to hear, I guess now you know how it feels to have someone ruin something you care about. Her face turned bright red, and for a moment I thought she might lunge at me. But before she could say anything else, Greg intervened, placing a hand on her arm. Jess, let's not do this here. Do what? She snapped, shrugging him off. She's the reason everything is falling apart. Jessica! A sharp voice cut through the room, silencing her tirade. It was our mother, looking uncharacteristically stern as she marched over. Enough! This is your wedding day, not a time to air grievances. Jessica gaped at her, clearly shocked that Mom wasn't immediately taking her side. But whatever Rachel did or didn't do, this is not the time, Mom said firmly, her eyes darting toward the growing crowd of onlookers. You're making a scene. For the first time in my life, I saw Jessica falter. She opened her mouth as if to argue, then closed it again, her face a mix of fury and humiliation. Greg took the opportunity to gently steer her away, muttering something I couldn't hear. As they disappeared into the crowd, I felt a small pang of satisfaction. Jessica might have won battles in the past, but today I was winning the war. The rest of the evening unfolded in a predictable mess. Guests whispered about the food, and some left early, clearly unimpressed by the lack of coordination. Jessica managed to make it through the ceremony, but her forced smile and stiff posture told the real story. Every time our eyes met across the room, her glare was daggers, but I kept my composure, engaging with other guests and enjoying myself as if nothing was amiss. Toward the end of the night, as Liam and I prepared to leave, I couldn't resist one final move. I approached Jessica, who was sitting at the head table, her makeup smudged and her energy drained. Congratulations, I said with a sweet smile. It really was memorable. She glared at me, her hands curling into fists. You think you've won, don't you? I tilted my head. Won? Jessica, this isn't a competition. But if it were, I think you've proven who the real sore loser is. Her jaw tightened, but before she could reply, I turned and walked away, leaving her stewing in the aftermath of her choices. As Liam and I stepped into the cool night air, I felt a weight lift from my chest. For the first time in years, I had stood up to Jessica, and it felt incredible. Revenge had never been my style, but this wasn't just revenge, it was justice. And as far as I was concerned, Jessica had finally gotten exactly what she deserved. In the weeks following Jessica's wedding, the fallout was everything I had expected and more. Word of the catering disaster spread like wildfire through our extended family and social circles. Jessica, who had always basked in her reputation as the family's golden child, suddenly found herself the subject of quiet mockery and barely concealed pity. She really didn't plan ahead, did she? Aunt Linda commented during a phone call with my mom, the disapproval in her voice thinly veiled. Honestly, with how much she talks about being organized, I expected better. My mom tried to defend her, but the cracks in Jessica's carefully curated image were showing, and for once, Mom's words couldn't patch them. Jessica, of course, was furious. She called me 2 days after her wedding, her tone a mix of anger and desperation. Are you happy now, Rachel? She spat. You ruined my wedding. I took a deep breath, determined not to let her bait me. Jessica, I didn't ruin your wedding. I gave you the same energy you gave me. Maybe next time, you'll think twice before sabotaging someone else's big day. You're unbelievable, she snapped. This is why people don't like you. You're cold, vindictive, and you're selfish. I cut her off, my voice calm but firm. You destroyed my dress, Jessica, my wedding dress. That wasn't just fabric and lace. It was a symbol of the most important day of my life. Did you think I would just forget about that? She fell silent for a moment, and I almost thought I'd gotten through to her. But then she huffed, muttered something unintelligible, and hung up. It was a fitting end to the conversation and to the chapter of my life, where I let her walk all over me. What surprised me most was the shift in my parents' behavior. For as long as I could remember, they had indulged Jessica's whims and expected me to be the bigger person. But after her meltdown at the wedding, something changed. My mom called me one afternoon, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "Rachel," she began, "I've been thinking about everything that's happened. I'm sorry. I didn't realize how much we've asked you to tolerate over the years. It wasn't fair." Her words left me momentarily speechless. I had waited so long to hear an acknowledgement like this that I almost didn't believe it was real. "Thank you, Mom," I said finally, my voice soft. "That means a lot." "I just wish it hadn't taken such a mess for me to see it," she admitted, and for the first time I sensed genuine remorse in her tone. Jessica, on the other hand, remained defiant. She stopped speaking to me entirely, which I considered a blessing. Her silence meant no more snide comments, no more guilt-tripping, and no more drama. It was the peace I had long craved, and I welcomed it with open arms. Liam and I, meanwhile, were thriving. Our wedding had been a celebration of love and joy, unmarred by the chaos Jessica had tried to create. As we settled into married life, I felt a sense of contentment I hadn't experienced in years. With Liam by my side, I knew I could face anything, and that included my complicated relationship with my family. One day, as I was cleaning out some old boxes, I came across the pictures I had taken of my ruined dress. For a moment, anger bubbled up again, but it quickly subsided. That dress had been a casualty of Jessica's insecurities, but it hadn't stopped me from having the wedding of my dreams. In a way, it was a reminder of my strength, of how far I'd come in standing up for myself. I printed one of the photos and tucked it into a folder labeled Lessons Learned. It wasn't just about the dress. It was about setting boundaries, standing my ground, and finally taking control of my own happiness. Jessica's tantrum might have overshadowed her wedding, but it taught me an invaluable lesson. I didn't need her approval or validation. My happiness was mine to create, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly free. Months after the weddings, life had settled into a peaceful rhythm. Liam and I spent our weekends exploring new hobbies, gardening, trying out recipes, and occasionally sneaking off for spontaneous road trips. I had left behind the constant pressure to manage Jessica's chaos, and it felt like shedding a heavy, worn-out coat. Jessica's life, however, wasn't as serene.